Hello, everyone, and happy Thursday. My name is Stephanie, and I cannot think of a better way to spend a Thursday, especially a Thursday post Valentine's Day. No matter how you celebrate, the book that we're talking about this evening kind of will have the perfect vibe for everybody, depending on how you feel about the holiday. No spoilers this evening, of course, but there's a lot of romantic elements to our story, as one would be led to believe from the title, The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. I am thrilled. I cannot wait for us to talk about this book. I've seen our amazing author this evening answer some really incredible questions on her Instagram and other socials. And so I can only imagine what we're going to get up to this evening. Like I said, my name is Stephanie. I'm with The Novel Neighbor. We're a woman-owned and operated independent bookstore located in St. Louis, Missouri. And we are one of the bookstores that's participating in the pre-order / on sale week special campaign for this book. So we have 3 incredible prints. I should have brought them in with me. I will go get them in a second because I know that we will talk about them this evening as well. But we have signed book plates and we have prints, and we do ship across the United States and even internationally. So we are more than happy to get you hooked up if you are in a city that Roshani is not coming to as part of the tour. So that's the great thing about virtual events. We also get all of these cool extra perks that go along with it. So like I said, I'm thrilled for us to discuss this book this evening. Before I bring on our amazing author, I am going to read her bio. Roshani Chokshi is the award-winning author of the New York Times best-selling series, The Star-Touched Queen and the Gilded Wolves, which, spoiler alert, is going to be our YA book club pick, and our YA book club is for adults. So we can talk about all books this evening, as well as The Arusha and The End of Time, which Time Magazine named as one of the 100 best fantasy books of all time. Her novels have been translated into more than 24 languages and often draw upon world mythology and folklore. Roshani is a member of the National Leadership Board for the Michael C. Carlos Museum and lives in Georgia with her husband and their cat. So, without any further ado, I'm going to bring Roshani on. Hi, Roshani.
Hello. I'm really excited to be here. Although I'm sad that it's virtually, and you'll have to forgive me for the really unprofessional background of a bed. Um, the reason, and I hope that you guys can keep this just a secret between us, truly, but the reason why I was unable to make it to St. Louis is because I am incubating a baby kraken. And we're so excited to meet our little kraken in June. However, her favorite pastime is rearranging my internal organs, asking me whether or not having a spine is optional, and more or less just like sipping away my brain cells like they are a fine wine. So I hope you can please forgive me for my verbal fumblings, and if my eyes look dead, it is not you. I am thrilled to be here with you. It is just that, again, a beloved monstrous parasite. That's much wanted. So,
Which is incredible news. Yes,
thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you. I said that the other day at an event, and I think it took people a while just to be like, I think she's talking about a human baby. Like, yes, I just can't bring myself to say it. I'm very superstitious. She's not actually growing a kraken, is she?
The baby a kraken. That's a fun. I haven't heard that one before, but that feels very on brand for some of our fantastical realism fantasy elements that you love to bring to the table. It feels perfect.
Oh, good. Good, good, good. Uh-oh, did it freeze?
Sorry. Oh, yeah, lots of congratulations coming through. We will flood the chat. Yes.
Oh, thanks, guys. I can't see the chat. But I wish I could. Why can't I see a chat? I want to see the chat. Is there a way for me to
It's
see
a
a
safety.
chat?
It's a safety feature.
Oh, boo. But thank you, and I really do appreciate the well wishes. And Kraken would thank you too, but she is pushing out a rib. So, also, I hope you have a fun beverage handy. It looks like I'm drinking Hypnotic, but this is Pedialyte because that's how we roll these days. Anyway, good times.
Is there just like Pedialyte packed in your travel bag?
Absolutely. I put everything. There's like emergency, there's fuzzy socks, there's this weird belly band thing, which is supposed to just like hoist your gravity in a different direction. A lot of this experience is mostly body horror, but it's great. So it's fine.
Yeah, do we have
Yeah, do
like
we have like
a
a
horror book
horror
maybe
book
coming
maybe
down
coming
the
down the
line
line
in like
in
a
like a
Absolutely.
future
future?
Absolutely. One day
I
when there's
love that.
world enough in time.
Well,
Well,
I'm
I'm
sure.
sure.
Okay,
Okay,
Valerie
Valerie
saying. Okay,
saying.
Valerie.
Okay,
Oh,
Valerie.
dang
Oh,
it.
dang it. Okay.
Apparently, you're not
Apparently, you're
hearing an
not hearing an
echo,
echo,
Rosh, but
Rosh, but
Valerie's hearing a
Valerie's
little bit
hearing
of
a
an
little bit
echo
of an
when I
echo
talk.
when I talk.
Uh-oh. Does
No.
that mean
Okay, I'm
I'm
going to
Okay,
try
I'm gonna
one
try
last
one
thing,
last
y'all. We
thing,
were
y'all.
trying
We
to
were
figure
trying to
this
figure this
out
out
because I've
because
never
I've
had an
never
echo
had an echo
before on
before
this
on this
platform. So
platform. So
give me one
give me
second.
1 second.
I think I'm still live. Can people hear me? No. What?
Rosh, are you
Rosh, are
there?
you there?
Yes? Can you see me? Hello?
Roshni, are you
Rosh, are
there? Can
you
you hear
there? Can
me?
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Should I log back in? Okay. It says you're in the show. Everyone can see and hear you. This is very frightening because I can't see anyone.
Can you see
Can you
me
see
now?
me now?
Yes.
I don't
I
know if
don't
that
know if
made
that
it.
made it better.
Is what?
Don't know if
Don't know
that
if
made
that
it
made it
better.
better.
That's okay. It's fine. Yeah, I think we're fine. We're fine.
I think we're
I think we're
fine. And I
fine. And
told
I told
everybody, I'm
everybody,
so
I'm so
sorry. Give us
sorry. Give
one
us one
second.
second.
I think that there's not a. Oh, okay. I figured it out, Roshni. I think this might be better. Um, Roshni, I'm gonna have to mute you when I talk and then unmute you for you to talk. And then, so this is great. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We all workshopped that. This is why the book community is great. Those were suggestions that came through from people in the chat. So, like, incredible. Everyone's doing amazing. Okay. We're going to get into it because we lost a couple minutes there. And I know everybody, thank you. Everyone's giving encouragement in the chat. Y'all are amazing. Love you, love you, love you. We're all excited about our baby Kraken. Let's talk about your other baby this week because you have a book baby. She's called The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. And say somebody is showing up here and has never, they know you and they know your other work and they are super excited this evening, but they haven't heard a ton about The Last Tale of the Flower Bride other than seeing this amazing cover. What is she about?
Ooh. Well, it's funny that you should call the book a book baby because, I've said that about all of my work in the past. Arusha is a book baby, and Gilded Wolves is a troubled book baby, but a book baby nonetheless. Flower Bride is the only book that I would outright call a Horcrux. That is what that book is. It is cobbled together from dark, sticky, strange trapdoors in the brain, many of which I didn't really have the courage to open until years later. And we can totally get into that. But if someone were walking into the store and said, "Goodness, I would like to read an articulated fragment of someone's soul, preferably something that's unsettling and maybe cathartic or may just be traumatizing, what would you recommend?" I would say Flower Bride. And I think the best way to describe it is that the Flower Bride is a fairy tale, but it is not a fantasy. And by that I mean that it doesn't have fantastical elements. The magic in it is, in my opinion, a far worse and far more dangerous magic than powers or harnessing elements or anything like that. It's the it's the power of charisma, it's the power of dreaming and longing and being desperate to inhabit a life that isn't yours. Um, that's the magic in the book. I would also say that in the tradition of many, many fairy tales, the Flower Bride is not real, but it is true. And that is the book for you.
What a like last sentence ending on that pitch. Incredible. It's almost like you're an amazing storyteller. We're getting some great comments in the chat. I just want to highlight a couple things. Evelyn is saying, it's so good so far, exceeding all of my expectations. So that's how your Horcrux is being received. I think where I want to, there's so much for us to dig into. And I know that you've answered this question on your Instagram page, but I think it's worth repeating, especially because we brought up fairy tale. There was some fairy tale inspirations from one specific one that you've talked about a little bit more than others. Do you want to talk about what that fairy tale is, especially for people who might not be familiar with it, and like how it led to inspiring, or what elements of it kind of led to this book without any spoilers?
Sure. Now I can't remember which fairy tale I was talking about, but I would say that there are two overarching fairy tales that the last tale of the Flower Bride really drank from, is the best way to describe it. One of them, in terms of the structure and even the names of the characters and the lack of names for characters, is Bluebeard.
That's the one
Bluebeard.
I heard you talk about on your
Oh,
Instagram.
great. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Bluebeard, it is a French fairy tale written by Charles Perrault. And essentially, it is about this serial killer husband who goes around and murders all of his wives. And every single time he has a new wife, he tells that wife, here is this beautiful little tiny key. Do not use it to open the door at the end of the hall that is painted bright red and looks extremely inviting. There's really no way to get around this. And of course, the wife inevitably opens the door. Lo and behold, she sees this arrangement of slain bodies of the wives who have come before her. Um, Bluebeard was very fascinating to me because although it has a happy ending for the final wife, it does not seek to explain its violence. There's no motivation given to us. I'm sure that some scholars can say that the reason is, well, women can't be trusted and blah blah blah, and this is what happens when you go trying to satisfy your curiosity, you're going to find corpses. That is still not a sufficient motivation. What did the first wife do, to deserve being killed? What happened? And why is it that years down the road, we don't have even the names of these victims? It's always women who are erased, women who are nothing more than a gothic body count in the sidelines of some story. The only name that survives is Bluebeard. And that really disturbed me. And it was something I wanted to play with. And that's why the bridegroom, who is one of our narrators in The Flower Bride, remains unnamed. The other fairy tale that was a huge inspiration for me is the story of Catskins. And Catskins goes by other names. It's also called Donkey Skins. There's a Germanic version called Allerlera. I think I'm mispronouncing it. It shares a lot of similarities with the Catholic Saint Dymphna. And I pointed this out to my mother, who is Catholic, and for some reason was like offended that I had mentioned this. I don't know why. I was like, I'm not insulting you, Mom. I'm just saying that it's kind of odd that there are so many overlappings. So if you're not familiar with the tale of Catskins, here's how it goes. And if you've read Deerskin by Robin McKinley, very, very similar. Yeah, I'm seeing Stephanie making the face like, oof. That Robin McKinley book is like a... Ugh. Okay, anyway. So how the tale goes is there's this king who's by the deathbed of his beloved wife. And she tells him, you must promise that you'll never remarry. And he says, okay. And he asks if there's any loopholes to this because he has a kingdom to run. He can't be alone the whole time. And his wife says, you can only remarry unless you find a woman who equals me in beauty. And this queen was exceptionally beautiful, and nobody looked like her for many, many years until their infant daughter grew up. And it is as disturbing as you might think. The father just makes a marriage proposal to his own daughter, who is disgusted. She tries to turn him away. He says, no, I'm satisfying the conditions of this marriage, whatever, this condition laid upon me by my first wife. And Catskin's response is that she'll agree, but only if she receives 3 gifts. Those gifts being a dress that rivals the sun, a dress that rivals the moon, and a dress as bright as starlight. And for her final gift, she asks for a coat made from all the skins and furs of all the animals found in the kingdom. And once she has those things, she runs away. And Catskins does have a happy ending. She finds love and safety and security. But what really, really struck me was this concept of all the different skins. This idea that you put on one pelt and another and another and another, and you disguise yourself. These things become armor. And when I think about what the Flower Bride really is, especially the tension between our characters of Indigo and Azure, who are childhood best friends, um, it represents the tension of growing up. This idea that when you get to a certain age, or before a certain age, fairyland is open to you. That's why they always say that children can see fairies, and children can, because of their innocence, they're able to perceive other realms. They're able to enter Narnia. They're able to come back from it. And at a certain point, when you start growing up too much, like the case of Susan Pevensie from the Chronicles of Narnia, those other worlds are lost to you. You are banished from them. You know too much. And I've always found that incredibly disheartening and incredibly tragic because when you move from being a child to an adolescent to an adult, you don't just shed all the skins that you possibly had on. You don't shed all the identities that you had. You accumulate them one by one as if it's a coat of many, many furs. And that sense, how do you reconcile all those parts of yourself, even when they are beastly or monstrous or whatever? All of those aspects of the fairy tale found its way into Flower Bride.
This is making me just want to like reread the book immediately. It is so interesting to hear you talk about it, and especially the vibe that you create for us with these fairy tale fantastical elements, even though what we were saying is like it's not really a fantasy, but it is in so many things. So I have so many different directions I want to go with this. I think what makes the most sense, because I want to go back to what you were saying in a little bit about like how we grow up, but I think let's go back to starting with our two best friends, because there's lots of plot in this book, but I feel like the reason that the story works and that you're so invested is because we immediately become very attached to our characters. Bridegroom for sure as well, but to me, at least for me as a reader, he was like my secondary. I was really invested in Indigo and Azure. And so did you always know it was going to be the two of them? Were they kind of like part of this from the onset, or did something change that somebody came out of of somewhere random? Like, how did we get to our two best friends?
They were there from the very beginning. It could only really be them. And they are the heart of the story. The bridegroom to me is a very interesting character because of course he is the most fairy tale aspect of the book, right? He is the vehicle through which we discover things. He is also want incarnated because you have to be a very particular type of person. Um, Almost like he is the damsel in distress. He is the fairy tale maiden who makes the agreement, who enters this marriage of conditions. And he's fascinating for his own reasons and his own hangups. But Indigo and Azure, they they came from that same idea. They represent a spectrum. The person who is, how do I explain it? It's that sense again, the tension of growing up, right? The part of you that wants to stay behind in fairyland and the part of you that wants to grow up. That's what Indigo and Azure represent. Even their names are just two versions of blue. They represent a spectrum. And I think I kept coming back again to that color blue and the girls um, being part of a spectrum of something because I was drawn to the idea that blue is the color of a beginning and ending. It's dusk and dawn, and that is very much them. To be at the dawn of your life and the dusk of a different part of it. And can you hold those things at the same time? Does one of them necessarily have to not exist in order for the other one to survive? That kind of tension. That's where they came from. Um, but that's where they came from thematically. In terms of the inspiration, I mean, I wish I could see the crowd of you guys, because I really really want you to raise your hand and tell me, have you ever been a teenage girl? Raise your hand if you've been a feral teenage girl, okay? Because I was a monster. I was a monster. Me and my best friends, we ran around. We ran around in packs, okay? Nobody went to the bathroom by themselves. Nobody like took a class by themselves. You always had someone. And when I think about those extremely formative adolescent years, the relationship that is the most profound to me are those female friendships. I remember running around with my friends, sneaking out of my house, gosh, breaking into someone else's pool. We really got up to some stuff. And I remember one of my friends, a bridesmaid as it is, we stayed friends for the most part, but there were years where we weren't, not speaking to one another, like some betrayal has happened, all this sort of stuff. Um, there was this one friend who when liked the same guy, and so we all just sort of agreed that we would share him, and that he could go one by one by one by one, because I think that he was in love with all of us. That's exactly what he did. That's a messy thing. Another messy thing is thinking like, I want to get up to no good. What should we do? Oh, somebody had a cat, and somebody said, well, why don't we try smoking catnip? Lo and behold, you discover you're not a cat. It doesn't work that way, you dum dum. And so I'm so sorry I'm saying these things, and here I am. My own kraken can hear me like, "Mother did what?" Like, I just pay no mind to that. The whole point is, you are never so invulnerable as when you are a teenager, when the rules of the adult world don't yet apply to you. You are stuck in this beautiful, savage, liminal space. That's what those years represent. And, having had the privilege of writing for so long in children's literature and young adult literature, I that ugly side of it is a thing that I've never been able to explore, because in order to really examine it, you need the perspective of age. And that's why Flower Bride is an adult book.
That makes so much sense as to as to why we got her as an adult. Uh, Lots of agreements in the comments. Again, people definitely raised their hands. So you really hit on something with our teenage girlness. Uh, Brianna said, this book made me feel so naked that teenage female friendship was too real. uh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
And Valerie agreed that their friendship reminded her of so many aspects of her own friendships growing up. So, like, really, you touched on something there.
Oh, I'm glad, and I'm sorry.
That is like one of those, like, oh, so sorry, everybody, you know what you're getting into. I think before we hit more upon like why this was an adult book and maybe what that was different for you, staying with the characters, just one more question to talk about. We do have different points of views. And as we said, we have our bridegroom, we have Indigo, we have Azure. How was that writing them for you? Did you write them and shift back and forth between views? Or are you somebody, we recently hosted something, I'm trying to remember who it was actually, who said that typically, oh, I think it was Mary Kubica, said that she typically writes linearly, like in one person's point of view, and then goes back and writes, like it's easier for her to stay with just one for consistency. So what was that like for you, shifting back and forth?
Well, I didn't do one perspective and then the other. I very much found that for the structure of the story to succeed, I needed to be able to braid certain hints, certain stories, and be able to have the perspectives mirror them over and over again. So that was extremely challenging, and also very rewarding by the end. And if for those of you who are writers who are tuning in, I also just want to take this moment to remind you that we don't get things right on the first draft, nor are we supposed to. The revision and honestly, the act of storytelling is an act of immense layering and giving yourself the time and the grace to build the story the way it wants to be told, even if it feels as very frustrating or revealing our own shortcomings, it's also the part that's the most rewarding, and that's what makes it come alive, in my opinion. Um, so that's how I tackled it. Uh, Writing the two perspectives was very challenging because, prior to Flower Bride, all three of the Gilded Wolves books and all five of the Arusha books are pretty close third person perspectives. I haven't tried or attempted a first person point of view since The Star Touched Queen and A Crown of Wishes. And A Crown of Wishes is actually a mix of first person and a third person POV. And what that meant was that I had no choice but to sink very deeply and very immediately into these characters' heads. And when you're writing from a first person perspective, it's the same sort of challenge, regardless of whether or not it's children's literature or adult literature. It's the sense of, how do I make this emotionally urgent to you as a reader? Because when we think about the stories that we love the most, it's not necessarily the prose or the plot. It is, how does it make us feel? And that was the big challenge there. Azure was sometimes disturbingly easy to sink into. I felt as if I knew far too well or remembered from my own teenage years what certain emotions were like, the sort of hypocrisy of them in many ways. And the bridegroom's perspective was a lot more challenging. I've never tried to write from the point of view of a man before. And I learned a lot. He's a very different kind of man, like he's very different from male characters that I've written before, and there's a sensitivity to him and a longingness to him. And there's a lot of my own, what did I give him the most? It was just this sense of I gave him my imposter syndrome is what I gave him. And this deep-seated desire for the world to be different than the one that you were inhabiting. The other thing which was sort of funny about writing the bridegroom's perspective was that I had my husband's help. My husband was essentially my beta reader throughout all of this. He would come home. I would just hand him a chapter and then just watch his face while he read it. And I love my husband very much, but his reptile brain suggestion, like the way that he changed this book, and he said, the way that I have given away that I am not a man writing a man's point of view was because of my sex scenes. He called me out on it. He was like, there's so many feelings. I was like, what are you talking about? He was just like, who feels this much? I was like, well, this is very revealing of you, but anyway, not the point. He was just like, my husband just was leveling with me. He was like, bro. I'm like, Amin, don't call me bro. It's kind of like, cut this out. There's too many emotions there, blah, blah, blah. There are absolutely no mention of the body, which is the exciting part. So that's where I was given the most instruction in the point of view, which was, I want to say that it was an elegant, uplifting, elevated moment of artistry, but it was really my husband just poking at him, just being like, there's no mention of her boobs. I don't understand this. Ta-da. I'm so sorry.
That is amazing. I that will live rent free in my brain for like a hot second of just like what he brought to the table.
He's gonna be delighted that anyone thinks he brought anything to the table. So
our guy's crushing it. He's talking about boobs. Everyone's doing great. I think we're again, every time you say something, I'm just like, oh, a million questions go off in my brain. And I would actually take this moment. And I'm sorry I didn't say this at the top, everybody. Please drop questions in the chat as we're going. We will have a designated Q&A portion, but if I'm like not following up on something and you're like, why did you not ask her about that? I will ask her. Please drop it in and I will make sure that we like get to things as we're also going through them, because we can always backtrack, but just know I'm happy because my brain goes off in like 5 different directions with any of this. So all of that to say, feel free to drop them in. I think, yeah, I mean, let's go into it. This book was not easy. You've been pretty open about it was like not easy. It's also why it's called a Horcrux. I don't think that would be easy to put all of this into a book for any of your books, but in particular, this one seems to have been interesting and like a longer journey. So, did that have to do with it being an adult book? Was that one element of it, or like what was going on that we ended up getting this like amazing package? Because we're getting lucky to just like devour this and just go all vibes and like full out. And I know that you had so much that went into this that I think was a lot of like, who knows, maybe even years. So can you just like talk about that with whatever you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure. Also, I want to apologize that I keep fussing with my hair. I wanted to not be a goblin for you, and so I showered, which I feel like I should get some applause for. However, then I like lost my Olaplex stuff, and like the hotel blow dryer is awful. So I'm just trying to like smooth it down and be like, calm down, sentient curls, you'll be okay. Uh, Gosh, that question of the process and the things that went into Flower Bride. The truth is that I wrote it at a time when there were a lot of seismic shifts in my own life. Um, I would say that I had inklings of the idea for years, things that frankly I wanted to get into with Arusha, or that I wanted to get into with Gilded Wolves, but there wasn't space. It wasn't the right story for that. It wasn't the right place to have those sort of conversations. And around 2018 or 2019, my husband and I got married, and we moved back to Atlanta, which is where we were, like, our childhood place. And I remember being so struck by how different everything looks when you move back home. The way landmarks feel shrunken, the way the smell of certain places doesn't change and yet you feel altered. Or even when you go to your parents' house, your aunt and uncle's place, your grandmother's home, and you find yourself thinking like, were these steps always so small? Was this table always this low? Have I gotten bigger? Has this place shrunk? What's changed? And you realize that you're what has changed. And I was thinking about all of that. I was thinking about essentially the reconciling of what I had been like the last time I had lived there for that long and who I was now. And then marriage was this own wild thing that was thrown into it. Um, if you don't know the story, I'm going to tell you a very embarrassing tale. And yes, again, as I've said, I'm a monster. When I was 15 years old, me and my friends had heard about this family that was moving into our neighborhood. We watched the house being built. We broke into it. I don't really think it's breaking in. It didn't have a lock. Didn't even have a door. We were just walking through and admiring the house plants and the master bath, which was exceptional. And I remember hearing all this gossip about this family, like, oh, their parents are so beautiful and so smart, and they have like these two children, and they're so great. And the boy is your age, Roshani, and he's going to be starting at the same school, and he's way smarter than you, and he gets straight A's and blah blah blah. And I was super, super, super annoyed. And then I saw him the first day of ninth grade, and the sun was shining and the wind was blowing. And I thought he was going to be this massive nerd and that I would hate him. But I thought he was beautiful. And I'm telling you, I really was instantly smitten. And unfortunately, being the trash can that I am, I had a whole host of opening lines I could have gone with, but I went with, "Hey, you, I know where you live." And that is a hard thing to come back from. But we carpooled every day, and he used to avoid me, and he would just put in his headphones and just completely look in the other direction. I borrowed a page from the Edward Cullen handbook and just sort of showed up repeatedly. Now that I knew where he lived, I really did just show up once outside of his room, like at 2 a.m. and was like, "What are you up to?" Which is, again, trash can behavior, but it worked. And the funny thing is, we've been together almost 20 years. It's a long time that we've been together. And probably the most disturbing thing that my husband and I hear is, your relationship sounds like something right out of a fairy tale. And he knows me well enough now and has heard the stories of all the fairy tales that we both know. You don't want that. You don't want a marriage out of a fairy tale. You're going to turn into a duck. He's going to turn into a goose. He could look like Oscar Isaac until 7 p.m. and then morph into a crocodile without any warning. You could be sentenced to silence for 7 years. You get your tongue cut out. Someone's going to be thrown into a pot of boiling water. You may have to wear out iron shoes. You may have to stitch shirts made of thorns for 7 siblings that you didn't even see for 10 years. Fairy tale marriages don't end well. And I thinking about all those things, in terms of Flower Bride, I found myself thinking about who would actually participate in a fairy tale marriage and also what myth really even described us as a couple. And all of it was coming together in 2018, moving back home, thinking about who I was, thinking about who me and my partner have been to each other. And the story that came to me, or that I was reminded of quite often, is the myth of Hercules. We know that Hercules was given several tasks. One of those mythical tasks was to wrestle Proteus, the sea god. And Proteus is actually where we get the word protean from, which means ever changing, swiftly moving. When Hercules wrestles Proteus, Proteus starts to change shape. He changes from a sea god to a leopard, a boar. He turns into the shape of water itself. If you're familiar with the Scottish tale of Tam Lin, it's very similar. Can you hold on to your beloved as they're changing, 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 changing? That's the question. It became a question of, can we hold on to one another as we both are shape-shifting 1,001 times? And those are just some of the things that went into Flower Bride, thinking about all those shape-shifting, thinking about how much stuff had changed. And then in 2019, pandemic happened. And my life, like everybody else's, was ground to a quick and startling halt. And I had the enormous privilege that for me, what it meant was I had a lot more space and time in my brain than I had ever been given before. And with all that time, I realized, my anxiety was just getting worse and worse. I didn't want to white knuckle my way through life. I knew that I wanted to have a family, and I felt that maybe the best thing I could do was to try to address the things within myself, do some soul searching, figure out how can I be a better parent in whatever shape form that happens? How can I address all the people that I have been so that I'm not carrying those demons with me into this new form of life? And it's fine. I don't think that you stop carrying those demons. You just try to make friends with them, give them treats. You can have open dialogue with your own demons. And so I started going to therapy, and all of those things came together, and Flower Bride is what emerged from it. I needed a fairy tale. Fairy tales have always been extremely comforting to me. And when I couldn't find the one that I needed for that particular moment in my life and all of its changes, I decided to write it. So that's where it came from.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We're all absolutely enamored with you. There's definitely some laughing about the Edward Cullen handbook behavior and some of the trash can behavior, but also so much love for writing kind of your own fairy tale, your own version of that, in all that you've done in the past couple of years, because I think that that's very relatable for people, that that's not an easy thing to go into, and investigate yourself, and also during a pandemic, like even worse. I mean, just like the things that the world has experienced in the past couple of years, there's no way to sum it up better than that. But thank you so much for kind of that insight into how we got this fairy tale. I think the next question I have for you is sticking with that theme of fairy tales and this idea that we've talked about it. We have vibes, we have gothic vibes, we have our true fairy tale of like we don't always like our endings, and so the things that are happening along the way. But I think something unique that you've done in Flower Bride is you really give us a balancing act. I don't ever feel that you leave us in too big of a downswing. You kind of you keep us going throughout in a way that you are caring for your reader. And so like how did you achieve that balancing act? Was that hard? Did that come with like the editing process? Or was it always important to you to kind of include some of these pockets of joy alongside of some of the like really rough stuff that we go through?
Um, yeah, I'm glad to hear that that's how it felt for you as a reader and your reading experience. Um, I think that it was just part of the natural rhythm of the story and how it wanted to be told. I think one of my favorite parts of sections of the book are actually where we get to delve into the bridegroom's scholarly asides on these myths and fairy tales and to delve into his own observations. Uh, and those things really came to life, I think, during the editing process. So once the general shape of the story was there, it just became an act of trying to chisel out from that draft the story that you really were trying to articulate. And it took just rounds upon rounds upon rounds. And it's interesting because I think Flower Bride is probably my shortest novel, but I think it's also my densest one. There's a lot that I I know it won't be for everybody, and that's okay. That's just the nature of art. But if it is of any comfort to anyone who reads it, every single sentence is there for a reason. There's not a single one to me that was wasted or tacked on. It was all intentional. And I think it was a very rewarding process of writing this book and bringing it into being. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear you say that because we definitely, when the first advanced reader copies came in, we like split them up and it was kind of like, okay, everybody has X amount of days to like read it before like spoilers are on the table, like go make your choice. And we all came back and we were like, whoa, this is beautifully written. I did not like, I did not sit down in one. You can absolutely sit in one sitting and just read this book. That is, I'm sure that I know people who have done that. For me, I was really like ruminating on some of the sentences that you were giving us and like really sitting with it. Because I do agree. I think it is the densest, at least of yours that I've read. That was my experience as well. Um, Sorry, what
Sorry,
did
what
you
did
say?
you say? I was just saying I'm glad. I keep forgetting that my mic is technically muted at the same time. But I even in the act of writing Flower Bride, it's when you have like a piece of cake that it's just like it's gluey and chocolatey and there's a lot going on. You can only have so much at a time. If that's how you feel about the book as you're reading it, that's okay too. That's how I felt. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. It's too much. Okay, I'll come back to it. I hate it again. And then come back to it.
To be very clear, she's a perfect book. She but yes, it's so there's just so much to dig into and to really like I was talking with friends about like how it was really great that I was with other people who are as passionate at work about reading it as I was, that I didn't have to like sit and read it, like not know anyone else in the world who had gone on this journey too, because there's just so much to unpack. And I do want to do a quick plug too for I don't know if you've gotten to listen to it at all, but the audiobook for this is also just like absolutely incredible. It was really fun I did a little bit of both just to also get that experience from the audio standpoint. And like I love this audiobook. Have you had a chance to listen to it at all?
So I have listened to parts of it and I it's funny when we started the conversations about who do we want for an audiobook narrator. I said from the very beginning, can we try to get Steve West? And they they were like, is the bridegroom British? I'm like, just please have Steve West narrate this. And Surah Shute also did a phenomenal job. Um, but the thing is, I can't listen to him for too long. I start getting giggly and then I walk into things. The first time that I heard Steve West narrate an audiobook, I actually almost got into a car accident because I like got into a fender bender. It was just like this whole thing. It was deeply uncomfortable. My husband laughs at me because I'm just so genuinely a very, very awkward goblin. Writing any sort of adult situation means that I have to sit in my closet with a blanket over my head. That's what I've done. And I've done this even as I'm incubating Kraken, which is probably making my back pain even worse. And I really need to get over it. So, no, I can't listen to the entirety of the audiobook. I will crumple. But I've heard nothing but good things. And I'm told that other people have also walked into walls hearing the audiobook. And that Surah, the way that she brings Indigo and Azura to life is nothing short of sinister and glorious. So
Yeah, I'm ashamed to admit that I almost ran a red light the one day because well, sorry, not, I don't even know if this counts as running it. I like stopped for it and then like forgot what I was doing because I was so just like into what was happening that I tried to like go. I was like, no, I still have a red light. Like I am not cleared to leave. I actually can't drive through this intersection right now. So
oh gosh, yeah, that really tracks. So yes, please listen to the audiobook as well. My goodness. They did a phenomenal job. It's really funny because after I kept insisting, like, please, if you can, try to get him. I've been wanting to work with him or been wanting him to read these words for a long time. My own editor had the same response. She was just like, "Is he allowed to sound like that?" Like, no, which is why no, we can't like I can't listen to this, but someone else should. So
yeah, everybody's now been warned. If you go down the audiobook path, maybe like stay at home, sit on your couch, put yourself like a safe place, maybe attach like a couple pillows to you, like put a helmet on, like just take care of yourselves while you're doing this. Okay, I spent a lot of time talking about the audiobook. Sorry, everybody. We have some great questions coming through, so we're gonna get to as many of these as we can. I think maybe one of the most pressing ones I'm seeing from a couple of different people are wanting to know, this was your adult debut. Are you going to keep giving us some books in the adult space? Do you have plans for that at this time?
yes, when we sold Flower Bride, it was a two-book deal. And the thing is, I I wandered down this path with an original an initial idea for what the second book was going to be. And I can tell you a little bit about it now, like what it was going to be, but it was an Orpheus and Eurydice retelling. I wanted to set it in the 1920s. Then I wanted to set it in Atlanta. I worked with a research assistant. I dropped like truly thousands on research. And then at the end of all that research, I realized I'm not the person to write this book. And it's a humbling thing, I think, as any artist, but the more that I played with it, the fact that I wanted to make it an homage to Atlanta, it meant that I was stepping into the stories, honestly, of the Black community, and it's not my place. So I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. I'd really like to maybe offer it as a packaging thing or help another author out who has that sort of shared background and wants to make use of it. I even spoke to sensitivity readers, and really I was just like, God, I love this story so much, but I'm not the person to tell it, which, grr. But also, I think it's for the best. So I lost like a year and a half on that project, really, just actively thinking about it and then doing some self reckoning of, am I the person to tell this? No. Okay. Moving on. And now there's another story that it really wants to be told, but it will require a bit of an emotional toll. And so I also need to give myself the space to get into it. It's an enormous privilege to get to write these stories. And I think that at the same time, if it doesn't come from some deep emotional core within you, it's not worth writing. And until you can tap into that, you shouldn't rush into it either.
It's really, I appreciate you sharing so openly what has been going on because I think that that is something that is another one of those things that we don't allow authors a lot of space to talk about. Because I think that we can sometimes accidentally, as readers, just be so excited for a new project that the pressure that comes with that is is unfair and doesn't allow somebody to kind of really open up about like what's been going on in the background. So thank you for giving us kind of that peek behind the curtains. And I think that we can safely say we're very excited for when it is the right time for you to give us another adult book. Uh, okay, this
Okay,
is
this is
a great question. These are all great questions. I don't mean sometimes that's just a transition sentence that you use, and I'm like, oh, these are all great questions, guys. Was there any specific inspiration for the House of Dreams?
Oh, gosh. So, my middle grade editor, who I love very much, once gave me the slightly hilarious compliment of, quote, "You excel at writing sentient domiciles," which is really funny. But the thing is, I can't get over the my own emotional attachments to certain places. When my grandparents left their home, when they moved, when they moved in with us, but it meant that they left the house that I had spent so much time in as a child, and I couldn't visit it. Like I could only ever see it in the way that I'd remembered it, and I didn't want to see how it had changed because it guts you. And it was the same thing when I was a little kid and we moved from Missouri actually to Atlanta. Um, I missed my house so much, I would write letters to it because I just assumed that it missed me too. And I wanted to reassure it that it hadn't done anything wrong. And that idea, when we play within the Gothic novel structure, of course, there's almost always a haunted mansion. There is something dark and creepy and eerie that is calling for your attention. What I wanted to do with this, however, was play with the emotional side in the sense of if you spend your formative years in a place and you love it and you know exactly how many steps there are, you know exactly where to hide extra Halloween candy in some loose floorboard of someplace else, you're not scared of the basement, you wander around at 3 a.m. and you know exactly where everything is, even with the lights off, I have to assume that at some point that place will love you back in its own way. The question is, what does that look like for a house? Um, Another thing that ended up not making it to the final version of Flower Bride. So originally, the book's title when we sold it was The House of Dreams. And there's this Japanese concept of hitobashira, which is the practice of burying someone alive beneath the foundations of a house or a fortress or a castle or a bridge. The idea being that once these sort of structures have a spirit or a soul to tether itself to, they become alive and they can protect you too. They can, in a way, grow to love you back. Um, and so even though that final concept wasn't fully articulated in the final draft, it is something that I think guided the atmosphere and the inspiration behind the House of Dreams.
That was fun to hear about. I think about the House of Dreams often. Um, okay, commonality in some of the questions coming through that I think I can kind of make into one question. I feel like everybody is really enjoying hearing just like the amount of fairy tales and mythology that lives in your brain, I think is a lot. It feels like you are so well versed in all of these fairy tales and myths, and you're like pulling I know you've referenced like several different ones in just how you've answered questions. And so I think Shauna's question maybe gets at everybody's the most, which is, do you have like a top three fairy tales that you enjoy sharing or referencing with people?
Top three fairy tales that I enjoy referencing or sharing with people.
Not at all hard to pick like a favorite fairy tale from all the ones living in your brain, I'm sure.
Oh, goodness. Um, well, I think, well, it depends, right? Because actually, Flower Bride is very distinct in comparison to a lot of my stuff because it's the one that delves the most with what we would call Western fairy tales and Western canon. I was a medievalist in college, and so that was a lot of my inspiration. And I think that in some former life, I must have been an Irish person because I am obsessed with Ireland and want to put my bones there when I'm done with this earthly residency and such and such. Um, and But the thing is that the more fairy tales you read, the more you notice commonalities across all kinds of cultures. For example, the idea of the children of Lear, who are the children who are, it's an Irish fairy tale, they're turned into swans. It bears a lot of resemblance to the Russian swan maiden fairy tale, which then in turn bears a resemblance to the Filipino sky maiden story or the Scottish Selkie story, all of which have stories about women who possess either a second skin or a dress. For example, with the Selkies, these are seal women. And when you see a beautiful woman swimming around in some loch and you find the skin of a seal nearby, that's hers. And if you steal it, if you take it, you can make her your wife. And in the Filipino tale, the Sky Maiden, it's the same thing. Celestial maidens come down to earth. They're able to fly because of the special dress. If you steal the dress, you can keep her. Um, so I don't have a top three in that way, but I have, I guess, noticed a lot of connections between three versions. So I'm very interested in swan maiden sort of constructions. I'm very interested in the idea of monstrous women and as they appear throughout all kinds of mythological traditions. We in Europe, you have the story of Melusine, who makes an appearance in chapter one of Flower Bride, and she is real. In fact, it is true that the House of Luxembourg, the Plantagenet family, claims that they are descended from this mermaid. And the structure of Melusine is very, very similar to all kinds of marriages with supernatural women, which is a guy sees them, thinks, oh my God, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my whole life. Please marry me. And the girl says, okay, but on one condition. Melusine's condition was that her husband not look at her when she bathes. I'm guessing this guy was like, okay, that would have been a fun way to spice up our marriage, but I guess I'll respect this boundary. And then years go by, and he's like, I don't think she really meant that. Slash, I don't care if I see her shave her legs. Who really cares? But when Bro opens up the door to the bathroom, he sees that his wife is a snake, like a whole ass snake. Or I'm not, and so that is like run, and he leaves. Um, this is my terrible abridgment. The other thing, which bears a lot of resemblance, and not necessarily to a monstrous woman, but to conditions within marriages to women who are not mortal, is the story of Ganga and King Shantanu, which is something that I put in my Instagram stories recently. But if you didn't see it, the short end is that this ancient Indian king sees a beautiful woman by the riverbank. Her name is Ganga, which is meaning she is the river Ganga. She is the personification. She is a goddess. He begs her to marry him. She says yes, on the condition that he never question what she does after she gives birth. He thinks, okay, maybe she just has an odd superstition or wants to put them in an ugly outfit, but it is not that. One by one, she gives birth, and one by one, she drowns their boys. One by one, 7 kids she kills, and he can't say a thing because he made a promise. On the birth of their 8th son, the king can't help it anymore, and he stops her. And she looks at him and is like, you're telling me that I'm this monster, whatever, but you're going by your own mortal rules. You have no idea what you're talking about. And it turns out that these 7 souls who she had brought into the world were actually the reincarnations of celestial beings who had been cursed to a mortal life. And they were so upset about this because who wants to be immortal with our economy and our healthcare system and our reality TV shows, that she makes them a promise. She says, okay, I will help commute your sentence as immortal by making sure that you only take 1 breath on earth, and then I will help you leave this cycle and get back to the heavens. So she does this for all 7 of the celestial beings, except for the last one, who ends up becoming the great Hindu hero Bhishma, and that's the story. So these things, Melusine leaves her husband, Ganga leaves her husband. Once they break the rules, they're left behind. But is it fair what happened to them? Is it fair the conditions placed on them? I'm not sure. And I'm so sorry. That was a very, very long answer to your question of top 3 fairy tales. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm very interested more in the top 3 connections that you can make over and over again. Because what it kind of means is that no matter who we are, we're telling the same stories over and over again because we're scared of the same things. We want the same things, and it unites us as people.
I know that everybody is not in front of us for me to be able to make this judgment or have people raise their hands, but I'm very willing to bet significant amounts of money that we could all sit here and listen to you talk to us about fairy tales and in mythology and really probably anything else, but forever. I it totally makes sense as to how we got this book, and how we continue to just get like such works of art from you, no matter what age we are as a reader. But I also think it was um the perfect note to end on for, and if you don't get it yet, you will when you finish it. I know it just came out on Tuesday, and so some people are probably knee deep in it and have not quite come to the conclusion of the last tale of the Flower Bride. But this has been incredible to hear you talk about this. I have to hold her up one more time because she is truly just so beautiful. And I do think it's important before we end, because I said that we were going to do this. We have some amazing art prints that go along with this, and you worked so closely, I believe, with the artists to make this. Do you want to give them a shout out really quickly? Because they will come with anybody who orders a copy from us. We still have some prints left. Not a ton, but we still have some.
I'm so glad. Yes, I had the absolute privilege of working with Gabriela Bujdoso, who you might know from, she's done a lot of the pre-order artwork for the Gilded Wolves campaigns. I worked with Joey Cow, who's fantastic. And then Emily, oh God, brain, not really now. Okay. I'm sorry, my Kraken ate the thought. She on Instagram, her handle is Millie IUS. She does fantastic work, and what's really, really special about her stuff is they're not digital paintings. They're actually all gouache paintings. So she does it all by hand, and her stuff is just so deeply moving. I really hope that you guys like it.
They're amazing. They're beautiful. Gasps were heard from all of our booksellers when they arrived and we unboxed them. So if you want to see them, order your own copies / check them out. We have them listed on our order or on our website under pre-orders. And I know Rash has like put them on your Instagram. You've definitely talked about them. So there's many ways to see them. And unfortunately, we've come to the end of our evening. If you are watching and you're one of the people who purchased a VIP ticket, you should have a link in your email about how to join us kind of in the green room for a couple of minutes, maybe ask any questions that we didn't get to this time. And thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Roshani, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything you want to say to everybody before we kind of log off for this portion of the event?
I really wanted to be with you guys in person, but even then, this was a real joy. I can't tell you how much this book means to me and how much it means to me that you followed me down so many rabbit holes and so many stories. This is it's such a privilege. It is an absolute gift and an honor. And I hope that this story resonates with you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you again. Thank you everyone for watching. I have no excuse. I don't have a Kraken, but my brain just blanked on like what our next virtual event will be. But you can find them all on our website under the events. We have many great in-person events coming up, as well as some virtual events. Roshani was actually just with Hannah Witten last night, and Hannah will be with us in a couple of weeks. So there's ways to support Hannah on there. That's a shout out that I can give, since apparently I can't remember our next virtual event. But thank you so much, everyone, and we will see you in a little bit.